Dankeschön. Ich habe mir gedacht, wenn eine Österreicherin über ein Schweizer Medium redet, dann mache ich es am besten auf Englisch, damit mich alle verstehen. So I'm going to switch to English and I'm going to talk about how we partnered with a Swiss medium in order to help discourse online become somewhat better. So we've heard a lot over the last couple days about how terrible discourse online is, and how much hate there is, how much toxicity, and how terrible that is for the people using the internet. And so we thought, how could we try to use feedback in order to target harmful online comments to make people who write those kinds of comments less likely to write comments like that again? Right. So okay. I don't know why this is not working the way. Okay. So we partnered with publica, Swiss online media brand, and we thought we would test 3 different email responses to harmful comments. What we find is that feedback seems to work. So people write fewer harmful comments after we send them an email. So what's Blick? Blick is the second largest Swiss online medium. It has 1.3 million daily users, which in Germany is maybe not so many, but in Switzerland is actually quite large. It has about 6,500 comments a day by about 2,500 unique users over the last 2 years. So this is quite a substantial online community. There are quite a lot of people who write comments here. So to back up a little bit, because this is a scientific talk, there's obviously going to be a literature review. So why do we think this might work? Why do we think that email might help people amend their behavior? So many companies, as we know, delete harmful user content as part of their moderation strategies. We see that actually this reduces rule breaking both online, but it also actually can help offline hate. But often they give no feedback when they do this, right? So people write a comment and then they don't know whether their comment was accepted or not. The comment either shows up or not. You have to go back to the site a bit later and see if your comment is there or not. So that's perhaps not so helpful if what you want is for people to learn from what they did. We also know from a separate literature that giving users explanations after removing their content can improve their future comments, right? So, which kind of makes sense, right? If you don't know what you did wrong, maybe you're not going to change your behavior in the future. If you do know what you did wrong, then you can learn from that. And there's also work that shows that actually giving people feedback while they are writing the comment, before they've actually sent it, can help them write better comments. This was from Twitter, but there's work like this from other places as well. And also even make them less likely to write offensive comments in the future, or tweets in the future. So we thought that this might also help on Blick. And so we divided people into different groups. So I mean, we have heard a lot about different strategies that people have. And I want to back up a little bit here and talk about one of my favorite topics, A/B testing. The thing with having cool ideas is that they're great, but even better is when you can actually show that those ideas help, right? And the way to show that is to test it against a group that doesn't actually get that kind of treatment. So what we did here is we had the control group, which is the status quo group, which didn't have any. This is what happened before. People didn't get any kind of feedback in response to their comment. Their comment was deleted. They never knew about it. So that we still kept that group because we wanted to test it against that group. That was our benchmark of what happens. But then we wanted to test different strategies. So the first thing we wanted to test was a placebo group, which is a generic message. It basically says, we have community guidelines, your comment doesn't abide by them, that's why we deleted it. It's a bit dry, it's maybe not super exciting, but we were this would be actually very widely applicable. If it works, that would be cool. Then we had some more exciting ideas. One was that given that these comments kind of are supposed to target the comments that we're looking at are particularly harmful comments, right? So they're hateful, they're insulting, they're pretty terrible. And so we thought that based on some other scientific work, trying to elicit empathy with the people that are being targeted in the comment might help. We've seen that this works on Twitter and in other places. So what we did here was to say, your comment contains phrasings that could hurt others. Imagine how you would feel if a derogatory comment was aimed at you. Please discuss the way you would in a personal conversation. And then finally, for the economists, we thought that it might also work to say, actually, your comment is much more toxic than most comments, right? It's actually a surprisingly toxic comment. The vast majority of people write less toxic comments than you. Maybe you should. The implication is maybe you should also do that. We also, because we were worried that people wouldn't necessarily open the emails, we also tried to put this in the subject line, obviously with a much shortened treatment. So you're not going to be able to see this very well, but this is just to show that these sort of treatment messages were embedded in like a sort of normal email, which started with, hello, thank you for participating. Then we had this, the message that we were trying to get across. We then, said we would appreciate future comments, but please abide by the netiquette. And then we also, which I think is important, is that we included the actual comment text in the email, right? Because we wanted to make sure, A, if it's someone who writes a lot of comments, we want to make sure that they know which comment we're referring to. But B, also, we thought that the learnings would be like more concrete if you like put it together. We also then said at the end that this was based on algorithmic classification, and we could be wrong, and please just email us back. This was partially like for ethics review reasons, but also partially because we did think that this was possible, right? Like algorithmic classifications, there are always some false positives. So, all right. So users fall into the sample if A, their comment is not published by Blick's moderation classifier. They have a sort of internal toxicity score which identifies the most toxic comments. But we also, in order to make sure that it was actually very insulting or hateful, we had like a sort of separate set of classifiers that I'm happy to talk about in more detail. But basically we identified the 1.5% of comments that were really pretty hateful or toxic or insulting. These are the comments we define as harmful. And we were aiming for 3,000 people. We did have to adjust the thresholds because the thresholds weren't doing what we wanted, but then we adjusted them pretty quickly. So we look at the first 3,000 users to enter this A/B test, and we look at the 3 months after they first entered the test, right? So for the people who got an email, it's the 3 months after the first email. For the people that didn't, it's the 3 months after they wrote the first sort of bad comment. And we see that the randomization at least worked. We have about 25% of people in each of the groups. And that's like around 750 people. So, did the emails work? So firstly, in order to look at whether the emails worked, you have to look at like how many harmful comments do users generally write? Like what's the baseline here? And we see that, so this is in the control group. We see that 48% of users wrote the one harmful comment that like entered them into the group, but then they never wrote another harmful comment within the 3 months. So that's already pretty good. I mean, these are pretty toxic comments. These are not just like mildly toxic. These are very toxic, but still about half of people never write like in the next 3 months don't write another one. And then there's sort of a distribution over the next, the other numbers, and about 15% of users write 5 or more additional harmful comments, right? So these are people that are pretty toxic. So what do we see for people that did get emails? So the share who wrote no additional harmful comments went up slightly to 50%, but in particular, the share of people who wrote 5 or more dropped to 11%. So that's a 4 percentage point decline, which is pretty substantial, given that these are people that are writing quite a lot of harmful comments. So which email worked best, right? We had the generic one, which we thought was boring, but maybe more applicable. We had the empathy one, where we thought that might actually help people like elicit some empathy with the people they were targeting. And then we had norms, where we were like, maybe you should be like everyone else on the site and actually be nicer. So to give you a sense of the control group again, these are the people that didn't get any email, and we see that like after they entered the A/B test, about 4.5% of their comments overall were harmful. So that's the baseline. And we see that basically all 3 of the emails worked essentially the same way. All 3 of the emails reduced the share of comments that people wrote that were harmful. Overall, the reduction was about a 1.3 percentage point decline, which since we start at 4.7% overall, it goes down to about 3.3%. So it's about a third reduction, which is pretty sizable given that these people are producing quite a lot of the really toxic stuff. At the same time, we might be worried that there's a chilling effect going on here. So that people who get these emails are kind of like, oh, I don't like this, maybe I'm just not going to comment anymore, and this is why we see these reductions, right? Maybe there's just less engagement overall. So we see that in the control group, in the 3 months following their entrance to the A/B test, people write about 90 comments on average, so that's about a comment a day. And we see that essentially this stays the same. There are minor differences, none of these are statistically significant. Overall, getting an email doesn't reduce the average share of comments, the average number of comments you write at all. But you might think, okay, maybe that's actually hiding something. Maybe some people write nothing and drop out of the sample entirely, and other people who like this kind of thing write more. But we see that basically that's not the case. 94% of people comment again in the next 3 months in the control group, and that, if anything, rises slightly, but basically there's no difference. It doesn't drive people to abandon Blick or anything like that because they don't like the emails. So any kind of concern that this might have reduced commenting overall, we don't have to worry about. Again, another thing we might think is that maybe this actually increases the number of comments that people write that gets published, right? However, we don't see that really either. So the share of comments that people write that gets published is about 32% on average. It's quite low, right? Blick does moderate a lot of comments, and that doesn't really change. If anything, it rises slightly, but again, these differences are not statistically significant. But we don't see that that emailing for really, really bad comments changes the share of publication. Right. So overall, we see that emails seem to reduce harmful comments. We see this 29% reduction in the share of comments that triggered an email, that were harmful enough to trigger an email, which is quite sizable. We also see no sign of backlash. We don't see comments getting worse. But not all metrics show significant improvements in the way that we expected, which, scientifically is probably to be expected. But we also see that emails didn't harm engagement at all, right? The number of comments didn't decrease. The share of users that stopped commenting didn't increase. We don't see any people dropping out as a result, which is very good news for the platform, and also obviously good news for us, because we didn't want this to come at the cost of people no longer engaging with Blick. And surprisingly, we see that the generic email seems to be as effective as empathy and norms, right? And it's much more generalizable. So as you can imagine, the next step of this is to maybe go beyond just targeting the particularly toxic, the particularly hateful comments, and target a wider set of deleted comments, right? And we see here that it might work to use this generic email, and we're thinking about how to do the next steps on here. Right. That's what I have. And I'm happy to take questions. I just need to log myself into the...
Thank you for your presentation. Did the people reply to the emails you wrote them?
Yeah, so they did. We haven't analyzed those replies yet. But yes, one of the things we want to look at obviously is did people reply? Did they reply annoyed? Or were they kind of what is the tone of those replies? And does it differ by the type of email that they got, right? Yeah, that's on our list. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. I'm not sure if the users you contacted went into your group again and again, and what do you think will happen if the users receive the same email over and over? So do you think there's a effect they know they will get your email and then behave like before again? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We thought about this. We wanted to make sure we didn't just want to treat people one time, right? Because we were like, if they get one email and then it never happens again, then that's like, they're probably just going to ignore it. So the thing we did was they get the emails over and over. So every time they write a harmful comment, they get the same email. So they stay in the same group and they get the exact same email. If anything, we see that the effect is the other way around, right? So we see the strongest effect for the people that write the most harmful comments. So if anything, it seems like the people that are getting the email over and over are actually responding more than the people that only get it once or twice. We don't know if that's because the email needs a couple times to actually have the effect that we want it to have, or if those are just the people that write the most hate, and so those are where you can have the biggest delta, right? We actually thought that those people were just trolls and that we weren't going to have any effect among them. That like those, there were just going to be some people where we couldn't do anything, and some people, maybe the ones that are just writing one or two, where we could actually change things. And so it's a bit surprising to us that we see the largest effect among the habitual haters. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously a bigger concern if we roll it out to everything that gets deleted, because then people will be getting quite a lot of emails. And then we worry that like it will just go into spam or whatever, or like people just will stop paying attention to it. But that's, I think, the next question.
Did you compare your approach with, contacting the users directly on the commenting section, so that you write a generic response there? Here, some comments were deleted, and was that was compared with the method of email?
No, because these were all deleted comments. Oh, sorry. Better? No? Okay. These were all deleted comments, right? So we couldn't respond to them publicly. It's obviously an interesting question whether public feedback or private feedback works better, right? I mean, this is like a thing that we would also be interested in testing, is whether people, giving people direct feedback on the site is different from giving people like a private email or a private DM or something like that. We weren't able to do that because these comments were deleted, and so they, we could try to convince Blick that it's in their interest to leave these hateful comments up so that we can reply to them, but I think they would probably not go for that. So yeah, we don't know. I guess an alternative would be to like post a message saying some comments were deleted for being hateful. That's a bit of a weaker treatment, and we can't apply that at the user level. But it's a very interesting question.
Thank you very much. I guess my question is, how does this go forward? Oh, can you not hear me? Can you hear me now? Good. So first of all, thank you. And then I'd like to know if there are next steps or how the project will continue, if there'll be sort of more platforms, or if this can be developed further. And I'm just very curious, as someone who deals with a lot of comments online.
We would love to work with more platforms to roll this out. If there are any platforms in the audience who would like to test this or other types of interventions, please come up to me. Either here, I will stay here forever if that comes out of that. Blick has been an amazing partner. They're super interested in going the next step to try and see whether this works for a wider set of comments. Possibly whether it might make sense to give people feedback for good comments as well, right? If there are particularly good comments that moderators see, because at Blick, so there's some share of comments that gets automatically deleted by their classifier, but everything else gets looked at by a human, right? So before it gets posted. So there are humans that are looking at all these comments, and so potentially we could identify particularly good comments and send them an email saying like, hey, thank you so much, this is great. please do more of this, right? So yeah, I think all these things are kind of potential next steps, and I'm pretty excited about seeing whether we can roll it out. I mean, these effects are large substantively, but they also affect quite a narrow set of people, right? And quite a narrow set of comments, because that's how we purposely defined the sample, was to just be really the most hateful sort of like top layer. And obviously there's a lot of stuff that's like somewhat hateful or just kind of toxic for other reasons, or cast aspersions onto politicians or something like that, where like the empathy treatment didn't necessarily make any sense. But so I think that's the immediate next step, is to see like whether other stuff that gets deleted is also susceptible, and whether that has an effect on the publication rate. But yes, super excited to do more of these. All right. Come up to me afterwards. Okay. Come up to me afterwards to talk more about this, or email me. I have too many slides. But yes, I would love to chat more about this. Or if you guys have tried anything like this yourselves, or have ideas of what kinds of interventions would be interesting to try, happy to talk about all of these things. Thank you.